to Top of the Hops. I am your host, Mike Riker, and this is a very special edition of Top of the Hops. As you see, I don't have one guest, I have two. So we'll dive into that in a few seconds. But today we're doing a special edition. Uh, this year is the 40th anniversary of one of the greatest soundtracks in the history of soundtracks, the Purple Rain soundtrack. So I brought on my two Prince experts. Obviously, the first one you've seen before. We did top five Prince albums. He is the great Ken Reedy. Ken, thanks so much for joining me today again.
Glad to be here.
And I brought another Prince expert who I work with over at Fox. His name is Joe Losasso. Joe, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I really appreciate these guys. Joe, I want to start with you. I actually, we worked together for a few years, but we didn't know each other. But I was working on the overnights, and I was working with a guy who's been on my show, Ted Lindner.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, he's a big music guy, as you know. And we started talking about Prince, and he's like, I'm not the guy to talk to about Prince. You should talk to Joe, and because he knows everything about Prince, you should talk to him. So I remember I caught you in the hallway, and I said, I heard you're a big Prince fan, and then that was in the middle of kind of my venture into the discography of Prince, and it was great because every morning I would come in, I would like, hey, I just listened to Graffiti Bridge, or I just listened to Musicology, and you give me all these great facts, and you would send me some kind of like alternate songs from the album. So uh, between you and Ken, man, I can't thank you enough for even my experience with Prince has been even more great with because of you guys. I appreciate it. So Joe, how did you first of all, how did you get into Prince? Was it early on, or were you a late bloomer like I was?
All right. Kind of both.
Okay.
So, all right, let's take you on a journey now.
Yes, I love it.
Way back, late 70s, I Want to Be Your Lover came out. I was just a kid. Heard it on the radio. I was like, oh, okay, that's a nice song. But there were a bunch of nice songs, and I was just living my life. 1982 rolls around. I remember where I was. It was the back seat of my mother's car, and I think we were going down the shore. I heard Little Red Corvette for the first time. And I was like, wow, this is different. But again, it was the early 80s. Music was changing. There are a lot of different songs, and I just chucked it up to another one.
Hmm.
Then in 1983, I got some things here to show you. My cousin got me this 45. Remember
Oh
45s?
yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay, there we go.
Oh wow.
1999, 45 single. Backed with How Come You Don't Call Me Anymore. So I listened to the song, I liked it, but it was actually How Come You Don't Call Me Anymore that got me and piqued my interest. Um, at the time, though, I was kind of, it was more like hair band stuff coming out. Obviously, Van Halen, 1984, and all these other things were coming out. And I was into Quiet Riot for a while. And I was also into early forms of rap, which we would call old school, before we knew what rap was.
Yeah.
Um, so I was kind of following different musical avenues. And Purple Rain came out. I saw it twice. Uh, the first time I wanted to go see it, and the second time it just happened to be playing at a roller skating rink of all things. And I was kind of like, there are little kids here. And
Yes.
I'm like, is this going to be like an edited version? Are they going to get away with this? Well, they showed
You
the
got to
whole.
purify yourself in the waters of Lake Minnetonka to roll over.
Oh, definitely.
They didn't play Darling Nikki, did they?
Oh, they played the whole thing.
Oh
So
wow. Okay.
I was like, okay. I got the soundtrack. It was one of many cassettes I had at the time. I liked it. Life moved on. Um, 85 rolls around. And I was dating a girl, and she got me this. It's the 12-inch
Oh, Pop Life.
Top
Yeah.
Light.
Yeah.
However, the back song is Hello, an unreleased track from the album. It was Prince was infamous for putting other songs that weren't on the album on the back sides of his singles. So I like Pop Life. It was an extended version. There's actually two different mixes. One with Sheila E. that was released in Europe, and there's this version. Uh, but then I heard Hello. And right after that, I went out and I got the next 12 inch, which was the one before, I think it was Raspberry Beret with She's Always in My Hair.
Mm.
And it was actually the B-sides that pulled me in. And I said to myself, oh my God, this is unlike anything I'm hearing anywhere. Especially with She's Always in My Hair with that guitar solo and everything. I mean, she's just killer. So from that point on, I was like, let me start going back and listening to what this guy was doing before all of this. So I bought Around the World in a Day, which was a good enough album, very different from Purple Rain. And then I bought 1999, and then it was like blew my mind.
Mm.
And then I started going back, Controversy, Dirty Mind, you know, Prince's self-titled album, and then his first album. The first album was okay. There's some tracks on it. I think I'm Yours and Soft and Wet were the songs I really liked. The second album, you know, I Want to Be a Lover, um, Why You Want to Treat Me So Bad, but it also had While We're Dancing Close and Slow, I Feel For You, like these other songs that were like, you know, Sexy Dancer. And I'm like, how come nobody's playing this? And then from there, I just got hooked into it,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, and that was it, you
Yeah.
know.
Ken, you mentioned on the last episode that you didn't really get into how you first discovered Prince, but you mentioned on the album Graffiti Bridge that Still Would Send All Time was kind of the like that was a song that really you got Prince's message. But when you first listened to Prince, like was that the point where you really dived into Prince, or was it even a little bit before that?
No, it was definitely before that.
Okay.
It's funny the journey, and you look at it's so fun looking back. And so you brought up I Want to Be Your Lover. For years, I just thought that was a female singer. Like it was only till I was a fan and went backwards and was like, okay. Um, but I have distinct memories. My best friend at the time in elementary school, his name was Dave Wagner, and we didn't have cable, and he had cable, and a lot of times I'd go over his house and we would just watch MTV. And so I remember watching Thriller over and over again when it came out. We'd go play outside, then run back inside. They're about to show Thriller again, and remember vividly seeing the video to Little Red Corvette. And I'd never heard of Prince before. I thought the song was cool enough. Didn't hook me necessarily, but I was like, this is pretty cool. And I remember Dave saying to me, and his name is actually Prince. It's like, no way. It's like, yeah, his name is really Prince. Like, oh, it's so cool. And fast forward to like Purple Rain coming out, and When Doves Cry just grabbed me when the first time I heard it on the radio. It was unlike anything I'd ever heard before. Not that I was any sort of musical expert or anything that I could tell you why, but I knew it was something I had never really heard before. And that kind of drew me in. And then when I heard Let's Go Crazy, the guitar solo at the end, it was just kind of what did you just do?
Yeah, yeah.
What did you just do? It was just kind of I've never heard, and it's in an era with no disrespect to other great guitarists, but when you're living in an era with an Eddie Van Halen, and I'm still like, wait a second, like that's unlike anything, with all the hair metal bands and all the guitar solos that you're hearing in the time, and there's just something special that drew me to that guitar solo. Um, so I was kind of hooked by that album, and I know we're going to get into that, so I won't talk at length on that album. But kind of when Around the World in a Day came out, and I was hooked enough where, all right, I'm a Prince fan now, got to get the next album. And right away you could tell that it's a different vibe. It's not Purple Rain 2. He just decided, you know, screw everybody, I'm going in a different direction, and if you want to come along for the ride. And I remember listening to Condition of the Heart and thinking, all right, this guy is something completely different. And then knowing that he was playing all the instruments. And I recently actually heard a story of the Revolution that they never did that opening montage live because it was too complicated for the entire band to do. So it's like, wait, he did it on his own in the studio, but the band couldn't do it live. It just starts to like boggle your mind how talented he was. And fast forward to Graffiti Bridge, and that was when really it was Still Would Stand All Time was that song where he's trying to tell us something. Everything he's releasing, there's an interwoven message, and everyone. And at times I would get really protective. I don't know. It'd be fun to talk about if you ever get protective of Prince's legacy. But, when fans would talk about, oh, the guy, he's all about sex. He's like, no, it's not just that. It's not just that, it's about peace and love and, you know, being human to each other and believing that we can all do better. We can be better. We can be better to each other. And Still Would Stand All Time was that song that, there's a lot more to this, and there's a kind message there. And I think I may have said this on the last podcast, but one of the things I've always loved about Prince and going to see him live, and it piggybacks this message, is how eclectic a group of Prince fans can be. And you go to a show and there's white, there's black, there's gay, there's straight, there's people who are dressed to the nines, there are people that are horribly trapped in the 80s, and just everything in between. And I always just admired that and once you got out there and played and you looked out to that sea of people, it was just all these humans of different backgrounds, of different ethnicities, just jamming together. And that's what he was trying to tell us.
Yeah. It's a funny story about, and Joe, you sent me the video of Prince and Taylor Dane doing this Still Would Stand All Time, and she's singing Still Will. And tell that story of the video because it's great.
Well, there's a bootleg going around called Rave Unto the Joy Fantastic. No, I'm sorry, it's just called Rave. But that's where he did. Prince was infamous later on for doing after shows.
Yeah.
And when he was on the Love Sexy tour, he did an after show, a couple of them that go down in history. One is in London, where Ron Woods joins him on stage. And then there's one, I think, in Holland. I got to find the DVD. I got to find the CD. But he did Rave Unto the Joy Fantastic, and I think that was like the first time an audience actually heard that song. And then he did People Without, the song, which he did right on the spot. He made it up right there. And the story goes that him and Sheila E. were talking about, people and this, that, and the other thing, and a serious conversation. And when he was on stage, he was like, okay, here we go. And he just bounced into the song called People Without. And then it jams into, some funky music, and then it ends. But then he does Still Would Stand All Time. So when he does it, he's saying Still Would Stand All Time. But what do you call it? Sheila E. and Bonnie Boyer were singing Still Would Stand All Time. So he turns around and he's like, who's the fool that's saying will? It's would. Time would stand all time. He goes, yes, it would. So there's another video that I just came across, which I sent you, which was Prince doing Still Would Stand All Time, but he had Taylor Dane on stage. It was a different night. And she's singing Still Will Stand All Time. But I guess because it was Taylor Dane, he had enough respect not to call them out. But he was just, when it came time for him to sing, and he was like, Still Would Stand All Time. And they're still going, Still Will. And he's going, Still Would Stand All Time. And it was just kind of like a back and forth. It was low key, but it was just like, hey, you idiots, it's Still Would, not Will.
Yeah, check that. I haven't seen that. But yeah, it's funny with those after shows. Like one of the best stories I had heard recently was that Prince was mischievous. Prince had an ego. I mean, I love the guy, but you hear these stories that, at times he wasn't the easiest to work with. And apparently sometimes he liked to mess with guests on stage in the middle of a show. So he would direct his band sometimes to change tempos and to do things. And the guest artist is behind, they can't see the band. And so Prince is behind them kind of directing and changing things. And apparently he did that to Bruce Springsteen once. And Bruce Springsteen came up on stage and was playing, and Prince started changing stuff while the band was playing. And then apparently after it was all over, Prince walks off stage, looks at his publicist and says, "See, I told you that motherfucker can't play guitar." And walk on.
That's fantastic. So as you see, guys, I'm gonna kind of lay back here, let you kind of do it because you guys are the experts. I do want to dive into the original soundtrack, but before we do that, obviously this is called Top of the Hops. Joe, what are we drinking today?
We got because it's fall, crisp apple, Angry Orchard.
Oh, okay. I definitely deal with that on a full day. Yeah, definitely. So I always love that. How about you, Ken? What do you got today?
Since we're recording a little early and I'm not really a beer drinker anymore, I'm going with Devil's River coffee bourbon. So a little coffee bourbon. I'm such a wrestling mark, but Dave Batista has been a spokesperson for Devil's River, and I
Right.
decided I would check it out, and it's good. It's a smoother bourbon. There's a hint of the coffee taste, but it's not overwhelming. So I'm digging it.
Okay, cool, cool. Yeah, I'm not much of a coffee drinker, but I like a little flavor that it looks decent
Yeah,
though.
see, it's a little darker than your
It is, yes, it
normal
is.
bourbon. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so I was trying to find a purple beer at my beer store. They did have one. Unfortunately, it's not a Prince song; it's a Jimi Hendrix song, but it is called Purple Haze. So it's from Abita out in New Orleans, Louisiana. And it is a raspberry lager, so it's got a little bit of Prince tie-in. So I've had this before. It's a really nice raspberry tart lager. It's only 4.5%. Got my little LSU glass here too as well. Um, yeah, so it's really easy drinking. You can drink about two or three or four of these and not have an issue. It's like I said, it's really got that nice smell of the raspberry and the wheat. Here's to you guys. Thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate
Oh,
it.
thank you.
Yeah, it's a really tart, nice, very simple drinking. It's got that nice little raspberry flavor to it, but very simple, very simple.
I'll tell you something. That's right on though. When I went to visit Paisley Park, we went through a room where there was a TV and a DVD player, and there was a Jimi Hendrix DVD case sitting on the DVD player.
Okay.
And I asked the tour guide, "Well, why is that there?" And his response was, I guess Prince was watching it.
Oh, wow.
So they literally have kept a lot of the stuff there exactly how it was before he passed.
Right, right. Yeah. So yeah, I was looking for something raspberry, so that kind of works. So I that's why I enjoy the beer. But yeah, so like I said, I'm gonna sit back, let you guys kind of steer the wheel here. But I will say this. I remember first hearing, you mentioned Let's Go Crazy, Ken. That was a song that really got me. I liked 1999 and I liked Little Red Corvette. But like you said, when I heard Let's Go Crazy on the radio, it was tremendous. But when I bought that soundtrack and I heard there was more to it than that on the soundtrack, especially with that song and When Doves Cry, there was more to it than the one I'm hearing on the radio. It really just blew me away. And I remember, guys, I remember putting that cassette on time and time, like almost every day. I listened to it, almost every day. I loved it so much. Do you guys remember when you first heard that soundtrack, or maybe one of the songs from the soundtrack? What got you into that soundtrack? Was it one song? What was it?
Well, I mean, for me, the thing that really, and again, this is cool because it's like delving into how you became this Prince fan. But obviously, when I got it, you hear "Let's Go Crazy," and it's like, yes, like that's the song, that's the guitar solo, and then like it ends, and you just hear, and it's like, oh, okay, we're going someplace else. Um, but for me, it was really the beautiful ones at that age.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I know we did the top five Prince albums. You ask me next year, I'd probably have a different five. Like and that's the great thing about Prince. And if you delve into being a fan, you start to appreciate things more than you did at a different time in your life. Like I went through a big Computer Blue fan recently where I'm like, that's a much better song than I ever gave it credit for.
Mhm.
But getting back to Beautiful Ones, the vocals in that and the falsetto, and it's just this tender kind of ballad that, and he's got this incredible vocals. And it's like, all right, cool, cool. And when I heard the soundtrack, I hadn't seen the movie yet. So I didn't know where the songs were coming. But as the song is winding down, and then it's like, "Do you want him?" It's like, oh, and then just the screams and at the end, and it was one of as a kid and as someone who's like burgeoning into adolescence, it was one of those. Everyone at some point in their life experienced unrequited love, and that just hit it for me. It kind of hit me like, yeah, like that's. And sometimes when you have a crush on someone and it's not reciprocated, like, yeah, you want to scream,
Yeah.
like why not me? And that song was the one that really kind of hooked me. I mean, I remember often trying to perfect my Prince scream, and get that, and try to nail the beautiful ones. And that's what made him amazing vocally is, I think I came close a few times at actually hitting those notes, but then that was it for me. Like I was not going to be able to sing for like the next 3 days. It
Right.
was like my voice was done. But yeah, I think that was the one song that I would say, all right, that definitely kind of drew me in. And I want to listen to that song over and over again. And then, of course, as a prepubescent, then you hit Darling Nikki, and it's like, what did he say?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Joe, how about you? What was your first experience with Purple Rain?
Well, I saw the soundtrack. I watched the movie. I heard the soundtrack. I own the soundtrack. I was into it. When I think of Purple Rain, a lot of times I just think of the summer of '84, and there were a lot of great songs coming out, and you could listen to the radio, and you had When Doves Cry, you had Bruce Springsteen, Dancing in the Dark, and then you had Cyndi Lauper, and then you had, you know, just a whole eclectic mix of great songs. Um, and I listened to it and I was like, okay. And like I said, I didn't really get deep into it. I liked it, I thought it was great. And then I was like, okay. But it wasn't until like I went back and revisited it.
Hmm.
And I think it was actually Computer Blue that pulled me in more. Um, because that song to me started going on like this whole little musical trip, like lyrically it's an easy song. It's just like, okay, whatever. But then you start listening to the music and then it starts taking these twists and these turns. And I was like, where are we going with all of this?
Right.
And then when I went back and revisited, again, it was kind of like the B-sides, because When Doves Cry, the B-side to that is 17 Days, which is an unbelievable masterpiece. And of course, they had Erotic City playing on the air, so that was B-side to Let's Go Crazy, so I got into that. And then that drew me in when I got the 12-inch of Let's Go Crazy. He added a whole another little section to it in the middle of the song, which is you'll see in the movie. So I'm like, when I finally heard that part, that's what got me too. I was like, wow, there's like much more he could go with this song. Like it's a great song as it is, but he could go and do a whole bunch of things. He's playing piano, it's not just a guitar, it almost is like rockabilly at one point.
Hmm.
It's like he's doing this, he's doing that with it. And then it's like, wow, like nobody's doing this. And this sounds fantastic. I mean, it really does. So for me, I want to say it was kind of Computer Blue, but it was also like the 12-inch version of Let's Go Crazy, the version you kind of hear in the movie where he's playing. There's like a slow down version, not slow down, it's like a stripped down version, and then he's playing a little bit of piano and stuff like that. So for me, that's what pulled me in. And then again, it was the B-sides.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, I got the soundtrack before I saw the movie as well. But when I saw the movie, it drew me more to the songs because of the way he was performing them. Like you mentioned, Beautiful Ones, Ken, and I'm sure I liked the song, but when I saw him perform it and the way he, like you said, that guttural scream, and the way he gets down on his knees and the way he shows his heart and the way Apollonia is looking at him, like that just drew me in so much that after that movie, I went back and listened to the soundtrack again, and I played that song over and over and over again. So that's what drew me to that was like you said, the beautiful ones. But
And who wouldn't want to do that? Like that's
right,
the thing about
yeah,
like who wouldn't want to see the woman they have a crush on out with another guy
right,
and just call him out like that? Like
yeah,
that's what's so awesome about it. I
I
mean, it's in the
know.
context of the movie, but everybody would have loved to had an opportunity to do that.
Right, absolutely. And we talked about this on our episode, Ken. Like that album too just sequence order is one of the most perfect
Yeah.
sequences I've ever heard in an album. Like it's I'm not gonna say it's like a medley, but it's just perfectly sequenced. The way it starts with "Let's Go Crazy" and ends with "Purple Rain." It's one of the most. It's almost like a perfect album to me.
And even looking back on it, like, you got to remember, growing up with like records or cassettes, it's the perfect side one, side two.
Yeah.
When you put on side, the side one ends with Darling Nikki and the blah, 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 and it fades out with the rain and everything.
Yep.
And then you flip on side two and the guitar riff to start you off in When Doves Cry. It's just the perfect like flip. And I always appreciated, some people might disagree, but I thought it was the right choice to end with Purple Rain. In the movie,
Yeah.
it's Purple Rain, and then it's I Would Die for You, Baby I'm a Star. But I think on the album, it works to end with Purple
Yeah.
Rain.
Yeah, and obviously through the end credits too, they're playing Purple Rain as well.
Yes.
So, which, like you said, it makes perfect sense. So, Joe, going back to you, I know you have very strong thoughts on this. So in 2017, I believe, right, they came out with the deluxe edition of
Yes.
Purple Rain. Let me hear your thoughts. What did you like? What didn't you like about the deluxe edition?
So when I found out they were doing this special deluxe edition, like a lot of fans were like, wow, there's a lot of songs out there that hopefully will be on this. So when we got it and we saw the soundtrack, the sound list, I'm like, what is this? Out of the songs that they released, only two, I think, out of them were actually in the movie or connected to the movie.
Hmm.
So I'm like, where's the other songs? So I think for me, I was very disappointed with it. And the other fact is that the reason why I think I'm very disappointed with, the reason why we didn't get what we're supposed to get, I think is because Prince was involved. Now, leading up to this, Prince was working with Warner Brothers again, and I think it was 2014, where he's supposed to get, they wanted a, he wanted, I think, his some with his masters, because I know that whole fight is a whole nother thing. So they said, well, we want a special edition Purple Rain album. So he gave it to this, I think his drummer's husband or boyfriend, whatever he was at the time, was around in the camp from Third Eye Girl. And he handed the project over to him.
Mm.
So when you hear it, the songs are too loud. It's just turned up on the volume.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're not getting like true clarity with the songs. And again, being a diehard Prince fan that bought bootlegs, they're not the best quality. I'm used to it. However, if you're gonna release it, at least give me the best you got.
Mm.
So that there was that aspect to it. The other thing was, I think because he was involved with it, he didn't want all that stuff out there. He really was just like, no. So what we got really was a bunch of songs that were done in 84 or around that time period. But most of them were done pretty much either after the film wrapped and after the soundtrack was done.
Right.
He had already moved on to other projects. So when we get this, we're like, what's going on?
Mm.
I had an article where he gave when this came out, the director was talking about it, and he says, Mongolian and Prince closely worked together to develop the foundation of the script, the musical elements of which Prince had already begun in earnest, writing some 100 songs. So he couldn't listen to all of them, he said, but with the first 20 or so, I had heard Darling Nikki and Let's Go Crazy. So out of these 100 songs, he pared it down to about 12. Okay. Well, that leaves 88 songs.
Right.
Now, I'm not expecting you to release 88 songs. I'd love it, but I'm not expecting you to release all of that. But give me a taste of what he was thinking at that time.
Right.
What he was working on or what his vision was before the script came together and the movie became Purple Rain. Because in the beginning, it was actually called Dreams.
Mm.
So, but then Prince was like, well, I want the word purple in it, and it became Purple Rain. So I'm like, well, give me that. Give me some idea. So for me, yeah, it's good to have the songs that they released, but they're not the songs I'm looking for.
Right. Ken, how about you? What was your thoughts on the deluxe set?
Excuse me. Yeah, I mean, not being a bootleg aficionado like yourself, I mean, I was pleased with it, but not kind of like we were talking about. I mean, to me, Purple Rain is almost a perfect album. So I enjoy hearing things like that just to kind of get into the creative process, how, just in my own imagination, listening to certain songs and thinking, oh, why was this cut? Why didn't they use this? Why did he make this creative choice? So it's fun listening to that, and especially since Prince is gone, any Prince that I had never heard before, anything I can get, I want to listen to.
Sure.
The one song, honestly, that and if I had one criticism of the actual released album is I do wish the extended version of Let's Go Crazy was the one that was on the album instead of the shortened one. I love that version of Let's Go Crazy. I mean the album as a whole, I think that what makes it great tied to the movie is you see the scenes. You see them like when you're talking about Computer Blue, when he hits that guitar solo, immediately I see him spinning. I see him
Yes.
spinning with the guitar. It's so the music is so visual. And I dare I say, I think the first 7 minutes of Purple Rain in the extended Let's Go Crazy is one of the greatest openings in movie history. I mean, in the 7 minutes of that song going on, you introduce all the characters. You see, all right, our protagonist is this electric performer, like up on stage. They give you a taste of Morris. At one point, Morris says, "We're gonna kill him." So
Yeah.
like, all right, that's his rival. You see Apollonia jumping out of the taxi cab and running away. So here's this, and then she sneaks by Chick to get in the club. So you're like, all right, here's this like struggling performer who's obviously going to be our female ingenue. So, and all as this amazing song is going, and they create this almost fantasy world of all these fans with the funky makeup and all this stuff going on. And in 7 minutes of this extended Let's Go Crazy, you got an idea of what this movie is going to be about.
Yeah.
And I just think it's brilliantly done, the way the whole thing is edited and put together. And if anything from the unreleased stuff, I just wish that version of Let's Go Crazy was the one that was on the soundtrack.
Yeah, take it for what it's worth. I've only listened to the deluxe one time, so there was no real songs that really stood out to me, except for the original songs on the album is the 12-minute Computer Blue, which I thought was fantastic. I just love the way that really sounds. But I read somewhere that in '83, the original soundtrack was supposed to include, I believe, what, a Wednesday, right? And I think what was the other one?
Father's Song.
Yeah, yeah, right, exactly. What do you think, Joe? Is that two songs that should have been on the soundtrack?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, Ken, here is your Let's Go Crazy with the extended part. It was officially released. It was released. This is a 5-inch single, which has Let's Go Crazy, the extended, and Take Me With You. These were released in Europe.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so that's why they're not here. I got them through my shops when I used to go buy my bootlegs. Another one is this one. This is Erotic City Dance Mix, which is the extended, and the I Would Die For You extended version, which is actually the live version with Sheila E. and the band.
Mm.
So these were legit released through Warner's, but they were only released in Europe. Um, Getting back to what you were saying as far as the sound list. So Dance Electric. Dance Electric to me is a great song. I actually have Andre Simone's version, which is very close to the Prince version. Um, but again, that was not a song that was done for Purple Rain. Love and Sex was recorded in February of '84. Computer Blue, there's a couple different versions of that song floating around. And again, this guy Per Nelson that I was talking about, he wrote a book called Dance Music, Sex, Romance. All right, so this is the book.
Well,
Um, this was very highly sought after at one point for its information. he goes into like the first decade of the recordings of Prince and everything. And he explained that what happened was that originally the listing had that 12-minute version of Computer Blue. All right. What happened was that Prince all of a sudden wanted When Doves Cry. So when he did that, they had to shorten Computer Blue. Then he wanted Take Me With You. Like I said, he was continuously working, and those are the last two songs he did for the soundtrack. So when he did Take Me With You, they had to cut down Computer Blue yet again.
Mm.
So that's why you have that shortened version. But on the bootleg circuit, there are several different versions besides the one that was released on the deluxe edition. You know, they have a hallway speech. It's called the hallway speech with
Right.
Wendy and Lisa. There's one without the hallway speech. There's another version floating around there that doesn't have really any involvement with them, and it goes on and on. Like there are a lot of, I would say, three different versions of that song floating around unreleased. So for me, I think they should have put all of them on.
Mm.
So getting back to Wednesday, Wednesday was released. Okay, that song should have been on the album.
Mm.
Okay,
Right.
is that originally from, again, reading from this, the song was supposed to be Jill Jones singing it to Prince. Apparently, in the earlier versions of Purple Rain script, uh, she was almost in every scene. They said Jill Jones, and it was supposed to be this woman wanting Prince, and he's not reciprocating. So that was supposed to be like an emotional part of the film, and it was never there. So that song really should have been on the album, but
Mm.
it wasn't.
Yeah.
Possessed, which is on the deluxe edition, which was released, is on there. Now that song you'll hear in the movie Purple Rain. Another song you'll hear in the movie Purple Rain, which was not released, which should have been released, and was after Prince died through Des Dickerson, is Modern Air.
Mm.
Okay, now that's his band you see on stage in between before Prince does The Beautiful Ones. Now it's a Prince written song. He released it, not he, Des Dickerson released it, but he said he only has a tape. He doesn't have the master. So the master's still at Paisley Park. So that you could easily find, both songs you could easily find on YouTube. I mean, they're not hard. A lot of the stuff's out there. That should have been on the album, and it wasn't.
Yeah.
So you had Modern Air, you had Wednesday, Possessed was on there, Father's Song was released, which was great. That's on the album, Possessed, and I think those are the only two. The Modern Air is not on there. Wednesday is not on there. It was Traffic Jam, not Traffic Stop. That's not on there. A lot of these other songs are not on this album.
Mm.
Now Electric Intercourse is on there, which is good. Now Electric Intercourse was originally the song that was supposed to take the place of the whole thing with Apollonia and Morris Day. But what ended up happening was that he did The Beautiful Ones instead, so he liked that. So Beautiful Ones replaced Electric Intercourse. However, the studio version of Electric Intercourse is on the deluxe edition.
Yeah.
It's inferior to the live version. Now, when Prince would have and again, I was reading from here this morning. When Prince started working on the Purple Rain project, he realized that he wanted to have more of a band live feel because it was part of the movie. So he invited a lot of his band to be in on this. Now, what happened was that they did a benefit concert at First Avenue in 1983, where he debuted a lot of the Purple Rain songs. Okay, it was recorded. They are the basis for the Purple Rain soundtrack. He went back and recorded some overdubs and stuff like that. May have changed a thing here and there, but the raw stuff is there.
Mm.
That's been floating out on bootleg for a long time. I have a VHS copy of it. That's how old it is. That concert is phenomenal. Okay, because it's the first time you're hearing it. Purple Rain is longer. He cut out a solo and he cut out a whole nother chorus part to it that talks about money in the song. I'm sure you could find the whole entire concert on YouTube if you wish to. But if you're going to do that, go and look for Electric Intercourse Live 1983. That version is the version that us bootleg people um, really fell in love with.
Mm.
All right. It's passionate. Like when you hear Electric Intercourse, you're going to hear the screams and everything else like he does in the beautiful ones. That passion is there. In the studio version that was released, it's not really there. It actually kind of falls flat. So for me, I would want to have that version.
Yeah. Yeah. What did you think of the Syracuse show? I know a lot of people love the Syracuse show. That was on it's on video, correct? Or is it on just or is it just CD?
The Syracuse show they released on it was video first and it came with the deluxe edition.
Okay. Is that the ultimate Prince show for you?
No, Sign of the Times.
Oh, it is. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I
Sign of
know.
the Times movie version. See, I got my little Sign of the Times.
Yes. Yeah, because I know, that concert gets revered, and I've seen some of it. The Syracuse show is very revered among Prince fan circles.
Yeah.
And obviously, I love the Purple Rain stuff. So, um, the way he does Purple Rain in that concert is tremendous. But is that the would you like to see a different concert on the deluxe edition, Joe, or the
Oh
Syracuse?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
hands down. You
yeah,
know, when he does the video for Take Me With You, it's a live concert version.
right.
And it's not taken from the Syracuse show.
Okay,
And he plays a killer guitar in that, and that's something I would want to hear,
yeah.
like professionally, if they released it.
And one of the things I was a little surprised in, and you probably have a better understanding of this. Maybe it's just because you just want Prince on the album. I kind of wanted to hear Morris Day's songs on there, and Apollonia. I know it's not on the level of Prince. I get that, but it would be nice to hear kind of like the complete soundtrack of the album, where you hear, like I said, Apollonia, Morris Day. What do you think about that idea, Joe?
I like it. I think I think at that time you were not going to get a lot from Morris Day in the time
Hmm.
because from what I was reading, they were pretty much on the outs. They were fighting. Um, so there was that. Now getting into the Apollonia 6, which I have the album right here.
Nice.
Okay. And this is how much of a fan I am. I even got the 12-inch, okay, of Sex Shooter. I think what happened with there was Prince was really excited about it. And after Vanity 6 left, she was supposed to take over. But Apollonia said she didn't want to continue with that.
Right.
So I think at that point, Prince kind of turned the corner and said, well, I need the album to be good. I don't need it to be great. Now, with bootlegs and all stuff like that, there are versions of Manic Monday with Apollonia singing on it,
Hmm.
which I have. Um, there are versions, from what I understand, 17 Days was actually written for Vanity 6, and then it was supposed to go to Apollonia 6, and then he pulled it.
Yeah, I was reading a little bit about that, Joe, that a lot of Prince fans were clamoring for 17 days to be on the deluxe edition as well. And they were kind of disappointed with that.
Yeah, that song's phenomenal. And
Yeah.
I know that he's got to have a longer version with a guitar in it. I just know it. And I want to hear
Of
it
course
so
you do.
bad.
Yeah, right.
If
I
any,
mean,
I saw him do
it
it
seems like
live.
every song he's got is like an extended version or an alternate version or a good, something different about each song. But I was reading about that 17 Days was something that Prince fans were really clamoring
Yeah,
for. That they were hoping to be on this edition, and they were severely disappointed that it
yeah.
was not on this deluxe.
That opening to 17 Days, you know how it's do 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 do.
Yes.
Everybody thinks it's a keyboard. It's not. Prince did that on a bass.
Wow.
Okay. And I never knew that until I actually saw somebody perform it he was doing for YouTube, and he says, "This is how you do it." And he recreated it. He says it's actually a bass that you play that opening on, which is phenomenal because, again, it just shows you the scope of how talented Prince was,
Right.
where you mistake what instruments he's actually using.
All right, Ken, let's talk a little bit about the movie. I watched the movie on Friday, and you mentioned on our show before, like sometimes you watch these movies and they're not as good as you thought it was going to be. I'm not saying it wasn't bad because it was a good movie, but it does have that 80s kind of cheesy little feel to the movie, but I still enjoyed it. What's your thoughts about the movie itself?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. The movie definitely has like that 80s feel to it. You know, the acting's not great. I think we'd be lying to ourselves if we said, "Oh, it's great acting." But what makes the movie great is just the performances, and that's what's smart. Like Prince made a movie that accentuated what he's like on stage, and that's what made the movie great. His performances, the songs, Morris,
Yeah.
as the perfect foil for Prince. One of my favorite parts of the movie is when Morris and Jerome kind of do a pseudo uh, Abbott and Costello.
Yeah.
And it's like you don't expect that in a movie like that. But the password's what? What's the password? Exactly. Password exactly. No, the password is what? What's the password? And it's just it's fun, man. They're just Jerome and Morris are great together. Um,
Yeah, I actually thought Morris was the best part of the movie, to be honest with you. I thought he was hilarious, and you're right. You mentioned it perfectly, Ken. I thought he was the perfect foil for Prince.
well, I mean, aside from being the villain, essentially, as far as dramatic purposes, the villain in the movie, but he's the perfect villain because the kid, Prince's character, which is very close to what Prince was like in real life at the time, is so soft spoken and so not animated outside of being on stage. Everything about him is so low and even keel. Even when he's like trying to be playfully flirtful and flirty, it's like, you got to purify yourself in Lake Minnetonka. He's not gregarious with how he's
Right.
asking us and saying this. When he looks, you get my bike wet. Everything is just so low key with him outside of being on stage. But everything with Morris is over the top.
Yeah.
Morris is over the top with everything he does. There's no dialogue where he's not being, over the top.
It's almost
And
like a
that's what
wrestling
makes it
character.
perfect to go against each other.
Yeah, it's almost like a wrestling character he portrayed a little bit.
Very much so. Yeah,
Yeah.
you could easily translate Morris's character from Purple Rain into an 80s wrestling manager
Yeah.
without question.
Yeah. And I love the part, and you cringe when he says it, but at the end when he goes into Prince's dressing room, how's the family?
Yes.
After his father just shot himself. But then when he's singing Purple Rain, then they show this shot of Morris, and he's kind of got this somber look, like oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Who knows what he was thinking, but I thought it was quite poignant that scene there. Joe, how about you? What did you think of the movie?
I loved it. I mean, when I saw it the first time, it was great. And then I saw it again, you pick up on little things here and there, and you're like, oh, okay, and you just start watching it, and it's funny, it's entertaining. Um, and Ken, like you said, on the one side you have Prince being quiet, like you see him on stage, he's this great big performer, and then off stage he's this almost quiet little guy, and it's like, okay. And then you got Morris being Morris 24/7, and they kind of balance each other out. It's like, so you don't have these big personas trying to get your attention all the time. They do it in a subtle way, just kind of what they were. In the film, I think, yeah, it's an 80s film. It is what it is. The acting's not fantastic, but I think it more than makes up for it.
Yeah, yeah. And I will say this as a 14-year-old boy and as a 54-year-old man, Apollonia, good choice there, Prince. She was beautiful. So, and still is, by the way. She looks tremendous. So,
David Lee Roth's ex-girlfriend.
yeah, yes, yes. So, last question for you guys. What do you think the legacy of the soundtrack will be? Like for me, as far as original soundtracks, I'm not talking about soundtracks that put all these songs together, but original soundtrack from an artist. I think this might be the greatest soundtrack of all time. Joe, what about you? What's your thoughts on that statement?
I think it goes up there with Saturday Night Live, Saturday Night Fever.
Mm,
Okay, love it or hate it, Saturday Night Fever was impactful and it left a mark. You hear the sound, you know what era you're in. You're like, that's it. I think Purple Rain goes a step further in that it doesn't pigeonhole itself. Yeah, it's 80s sounding kind of quote unquote, but it doesn't pigeon itself into the 80s. You could easily listen to those songs today.
yeah,
And I think that's the genius of Prince is that he never, when you look at it, a lot of people like you could pick out artists and say, okay, well, that was this era and that was that era and in time, and we all kind of dressed similar. Prince didn't do that. He created his own look and his own feel. So when you look at it, you're like, well, this could be today.
yeah,
This could have been late 90s. This could be 2034. It lasts, and I think at the core, it's got to be up there. I mean, yeah, Saturday Night Fever, and I'm just using Saturday Night Fever as an example because it's so impactful as a soundtrack. Um, I think Purple Rain succeeds in it.
yeah. Ken, how about you? What's your thoughts on the legacy of Purple Rain, the soundtrack?
I mean, I would put it over Saturday Night Fever. I mean, I think it's probably the for a movie like not being a concert movie because you could also argue Sign of the Times. But for a movie with characters and acting and a plot and subplots, I don't think you can compare really to what Purple Rain is as a benchmark movie for the time and as a soundtrack. Like I said earlier, you listen to those songs on the soundtrack, you visualize everything. And isn't that what a soundtrack's supposed to do?
Mm.
If you've seen the movie, every single song, you kind of have this visual image of what's going on um, in the movie. You listen to that guitar solo at the end of Purple Rain, and you understand why Jill's crying at the end. You get it, and that's what's the magic of that soundtrack. And with Prince, visually, I agree with you. I think it's the '80s, but he forged his own path, created his own visual nature, and it's one of those things that sometimes you have this convergence in time, and with the early stages of MTV in the '80s and music becoming more visual, when you have a creative genius like Prince to be able to take music and really delve into the visual medium with music. I think it's the perfect storm for someone who is as much of a genius as Prince was. And it was, where can I expand in media? And he created his own look as far as Minnesota, his own sound, his own fashion. When you think of the '80s, there's a lot of different fashions, and there's some that are great and some are really cheesy and we should never go back to. But then there's this other genre that's just Prince. That's Prince in like Minnesota. And I don't know if you can think of many. There are cities and towns that have a sound and a look, but I don't know how many cities or towns have a sound and a look that you can trace back to one singular person and perhaps one singular movie and movie soundtrack.
Right.
And that's Prince in Minneapolis and Minnesota and Purple Rain. And then I don't know if you could think of any other artists that really did that for an area, but he did it. There's definitely the look and the sound of that area, and to me, it's the best soundtrack ever.
Yeah, I mean, I'll argue Elvis with Memphis. Obviously, I'm a huge Elvis fan, but you're right. As far as the soundtrack itself, though, adding that layer to it makes even more so with Prince and Minneapolis and stuff like that. So yeah, I agree with you.
But
Um,
Mike, I will play devil's advocate here, though. One minor thing. When we say soundtrack, there is some controversy to that, Prince being Prince, because it's not a true soundtrack. You don't have the Time songs on there. You don't have Apollonia 6 on there. You don't have Des Dickerson Modern Air on there. So in reality, if it was a true soundtrack, it'd probably be a double album,
yeah.
hands down. But I think when we think Purple Rain, yeah, those other songs and artists are on there. But I think when you think Purple Rain, you think of him only.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think for me, yeah, it's a soundtrack to Purple Rain. The other songs are great, are good, but his are great. And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, you're going to remember him more than you're going to remember them
Yeah, that's a good
musically.
point. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he's definitely steals the show on the soundtrack and in the movie with his performances. Usually we do a top five here. I won't do that to you guys, but Joe, what would you say your top two or three songs are from the album, your favorites? And if you want to include some of the deluxe edition, that's fine. But what would be your top couple there?
From there, mm, I'm going to have to go uh, with the ones everybody knows, and Let's Go Crazy, 12-inch version. Um, When Doves Cry, something that was totally not done by anybody before or since. And I will go with Purple Rain.
Yeah, the top three. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's the beautiful ones has always been my favorite. Then Purple Rain, then Let's Go Crazy. I feel terrible leaving When Doves Cry out. It's such a masterpiece. But that the beautiful ones always had a special place for me. Ken, how about you? What would be your top couple there?
I just do a tie with all of them. It's, I mean, honestly, it's really difficult. And like I
It
said, the one
is.
thing about being a Prince fan that I think is great, if you really delve in, um, you start to appreciate songs that you didn't appreciate when you initially may have listened to the album, and you revisit it and you're like, oh, this song is a lot better than I thought it was. I don't, for me, even growing up, Purple Rain wasn't one of my favorites on the soundtrack. And then I remember the first time I saw Purple Rain live, and when he went into that guitar solo, I mean, I remember the tears starting to come down as the guitar solo started, and I'm like, what's happening to me? And you really realize how great a song and how great that guitar solo is at the end.
You make a great point, Ken, because I just when I was listening to Purple Rain a couple weeks ago, Take Me With You for some reason hit me a little different this
Yeah,
time around. And it had that to me, it had that little raspberry beret kind of tone to it. And I'm like, oh, this, I do like this song. I always kind of thought of it not as a throwaway, but kind of like that album filler. But now I listen to that song all the time now. I love Take Me With You.
yeah, it's a weird. And like I said, I've gone through a computer blue phase recently
Yeah.
where I listened to that again and just thinking, wow, like that guitar solo and the musicianship in the middle of that song is like it's incredible. And you listen to it over and over again, like, wow, this is great stuff. So it's so difficult to pick your favorites, but because of the emotional connection that I've had seeing it live, I would probably have to go with Purple Rain, um, tops, and then this is so difficult. Uh, I won't go. I'm not going to go two and three. I'm going to go a tie, but I'll just pick two songs. But let's go crazy because of that guitar solo that grabbed me, and I got to kind of give that. When Doves Cry kind of brought me in, but Let's Go Crazy really solidified that this is my guy. I'm a Prince fan. And tied with that, I'll go with Beautiful Ones because if Let's Go Crazy pulled me in off the radio. It was the Beautiful Ones that pulled me in when I first listened to the album and just was floored with the vocals. And at that point in my life, never having heard vocals like that before in my life. And how is this skinny little nothing, have such a big voice? And how is he able to do that? It was something that was just awe inspiring when I first heard the song. So Purple Rain, Let's Go Crazy, and The Beautiful Ones.
What is your top songs on Purple Rain? Please comment down below. Ken, Joe, thanks for the education. I really appreciate it. I'm always learning from you guys. Thanks so much for doing this with me today. Appreciate it.
Thank you. This is awesome.
Thank you. Had a great time.